From time to time, Max and Min visit their Auntie Mary, who lives in Sydney. Sydney is the most populated city in Australia, with about 5 million people living there. It also takes up a very large area, equal to about 100 kilometres by 120 kilometres, that is, 12,000 square kilometres. Indigenous Australians have lived there for at least 30,000 years, and the first European settlement was established there by the English in 1788, about 230 years ago. When the twins visit, usually with their mum, they arrive by train. However, since Sydney has a very beautiful harbour and rivers which wind their way through many of her suburbs, they especially love to catch ferries to travel around the city on the water. Max and Min usually go to transportnsw.info on their mum's tablet or smartphone to check the timetables before catching public transport. On that site, they can find all the train, bus, ferry, and light rail timetables they need to plan their trips. Back home, they had learnt how to use a bus timetable in video 4.6.6 to plan a trip to the movies. In Sydney, they usually left their train at Circular Quay Station, walked to the nearby wharves, and travelled on the Rivercat ferry under the harbour bridge and along the Parramatta River to their Auntie Mary's place in Abbotsford. They used this Parramatta ferry timetable to work out the times. On this particular trip, they wanted to get to Auntie Mary's place by 10 a.m. The timetable lists all the stops along the way from Circular Quay to Parramatta down the left side. Finding Abbotsford, they could see that there was a ferry that arrived there at 9:44 a.m. They could then be at their auntie's place by 10, allowing about a quarter of an hour to walk there from the wharf. Moving their eye up that column, they could see they would have to catch the 9:07 a.m. ferry at Circular Quay. Note that, for the afternoon ferries, this timetable shows 24-hour time, which the twins learnt about in video 5.6.5. Today, Max and Min were visiting their auntie because she knows a lot about Australian history, and she had offered to help the twins create a timeline for their history project. As you can see in this simple example, a timeline displays a series of events, usually along a horizontal line or bar, in chronological order, that is, arranged in order of when each event happened. Timelines also usually use a scale so that you can compare, for example, how long certain events lasted just by looking at the timeline. In this example, we can easily see that this person spent a lot more time at work in their job than they did at school. Let's listen to Auntie Mary discuss the timeline scale with Max and Min. Well, kids, she starts, Australian human history begins with the first Indigenous Australians who arrived in the north of our country from Southeast Asia around about 65,000 BC. Dates before the birth of Jesus Christ are referred to as BC, before Christ, or sometimes BCE, before the current or common era. The first known landings by Europeans from 1606 AD were the Dutch explorers who sailed along our western and southern coasts and who named the land New Holland. Dates after the birth of Jesus Christ are referred to as AD, Anno Domini, which means in the year of the Lord, or sometimes CE, in the current or common era. The first permanent European settlement was established in 1788 AD by the British First Fleet, where Sydney is today. So, Australian human history is about 67,000 years long, from 65,000 BC to today. The problem you face with using a scale for your 67,000 year timeline is that if, for example, you make 1 centimetre of the timeline represent 100 years, the timeline would be 670 centimetres long, since 67,000 divided by 100 equals 670, that is, there are 670 lots of 100 years. That is 6.7 metres, which is longer than my living room. And on this very long timeline, only the last 4 centimetres or so would represent our history since the Dutch explorers. There would be a lot of empty space on your timeline, but at the same time, you wouldn't be able to fit in all our history in the last 400 years. So what should we do, Auntie? Min asked. We want our timeline to be much, much shorter than 6.7 metres. In fact, no longer than 90 centimetres, and most of the history on it will be events that happened in the last 400 years. Well, Auntie Mary replied, what I suggest is still use a scale and still show the first Australians arriving in 65,000 BC. However, also show a break in the timeline, like this, to indicate that there are many years not shown by the line. That way, you can use a more suitable scale, such as 1 centimetre represents 5 years, which gives you a timeline under 90 centimetres and will also give you space to show all the events since 1600 AD that you want to show. Just like this example that highlights just a few events you might want to include. Go to transportnsw.info and check out the different timetables there. Find and use transport timetables for your own location. Now you can watch this video again or try the quiz and look at the chart that comes with this video.